We get a picture of God sometimes, or have a picture made for us of God sometimes, that makes it almost seem like God is sadistic, and He could not be further from that. It hurts God when He has to discipline. It hurts God when He has to witness people straying away. And I don't know that there's a book that quite shows this in the Old Testament as well as Hosea does. He begins with one of a couple of metaphors that he's going to use in the book. He begins with one of marriage. Because to God, the bride, which is in our time the bride of Christ, but in the even bigger picture, the bride of Christ not only encompasses us as Christians, but all saints of all time who are faithful to God. God truly sees us as His bride. And because He sees that, when we stray and when we wander off into other things and chase other gods, whether that's in the name of a religion or in the name of just a desire we have to put ourselves as our God, to Him it feels like adultery. I have a friend that, and I don't even know, I need to get new contact information for him. He was going to write a book about why he believed, and Hosea was an important part of his thinking, that idolatry is not compared to adultery in the Old Testament. Adultery is wrong because it is so close to idolatry that we have it backwards. And I think you read Hosea, and I think he has a point. Adultery is wrong because it reminds God of how far we have strayed. It is the same level of unfaithfulness to the one we pledged ourselves to as the one it is when we cheat on the one to whom we have pledged ourselves. And it's harmful and hurtful and offensive to God, not because, hey, you did something wrong, but because He knows what it's like to stay up at night wondering if His bride will come home. And unfortunately for God, knowing exactly where she was. That's the image that God gives to Hosea to communicate to Israel, I want you to come home. This book is not about judgment. Many of the minor prophets get mistaken as books of judgment. They contain them, they do. But they are about God's relentless pursuit of His bride. So, we're going to start by reading a couple of passages here. First, right here in chapter 1, the setting of this is Israel. Hosea seems to be, there's not a whole lot we know about him the things we know about him are very personal, but we don't know, backgrounds and all of that kind of thing. We don't have a whole lot about him. You kind of pick things up from his language. So from his language, we pick up that he is from Israel, not Judah, because when he refers to the king of Israel, he refers to him as our king, not their king. Okay, those kind of little things, they matter. Pronouns tell the story. And so we know that he is from Israel. He primarily prophesied during Jeroboam II's reign. And this is all happening 2.25 millennia ago, somewhere around 740 BC. Israel had become at this point very unfaithful. Okay, they live in a time of relative prosperity. So, when they go to the bank, that seems pretty good. When they go to the store, that seems pretty good. It's a time of relative peace for those who were in Israel. And Jeroboam had quite a long reign. He reigns for decades, and Hosea was a prophet during all that time. But, again, they were not faithful. They worshipped Baal. If you're not familiar, many are. If you're not familiar, Baal was an idol god, a pagan deity that promoted not righteousness or holiness, but that promoted promiscuity, greed, idolatry, selfishness. I can't quite give to you all the ways in which it was just evil. Some of them are PG-13 to talk about from the pulpit, It's just bad stuff. I'm just going to sum it up that way. You can go do your homework. But they were chasing after Baal worship, chasing after another man, basically, is the way that God puts it. And so he tells Hosea, I need you to do something for me. Let's read what he says first. This will be up on the screen. This comes from the ESV. When the Lord first spoke through Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, go, take to yourself a wife of whoredom. That's nice and soft, right there? Good wording this morning here. Take a wife of whoredom and have children of whoredom, for the land commits great whoredom. I've not said this word so much in my life. By forsaking the Lord. So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. So first, we'll just deal with all that first. Can you imagine for a second what it must be like to have God come to you and say, listen, I need you to speak for me? Maybe as a faithful person, you're excited about that. Oh, Lord, we've been needing to say something to these people. What have you got? He says, well, now first I've got to have you go and do something for me. Okay, what do you want me to do? Because maybe Hosea hadn't read Ezekiel. So you'd be scared if you've read Ezekiel, very scared. He says, I need you to go find a wife. Oh, good. I've been wanting to get married. That sounds great. I want you to go find a wife who, I'm using Bible words, okay? I want you to go find a whore, and I want you to marry her. Just what every mother dreams for her child, right? Everybody. Can you imagine what that was like? We kind of read this and we go, wow, that would have been bad. But think about it for a second. You're Hosea. You're a faithful child of God. If he had any plans, who knows what he was thinking, but if he had plans to someday find a wife, settle down and have children, he's the kind of man that would have had a very high standard for a godly woman. And he's told, I'm not going to let you do that. He'd never read Your Best Life Now. He didn't know that sometimes God calls you to hard things, not to the country club. And so, what does he do? He goes and he finds a woman. I always wonder how Gomer felt after this was published. You're reading, oh, Hosea, what you been working on? What is this verse 2? I want you to go find a woman who's going to be given to whoredom. Hosea. And what does Hosea do? Well, was I wrong? What do you do? You'll find out he wasn't wrong. He goes and he finds her wherever you find somebody that's sure to be like that. Imagine having to choose the very kind of person your parents had prayed you would never find, that you were trying your hardest to avoid. And because you're a faithful person, one you must be faithful to. So she's going to be unfaithful, and you must be faithful. Now, how hard does that get? This is Hosea's lot in life. Verse 4, and the Lord said to him, call his name Jezreel. If you haven't read all of this before or not in a long time, God tells him the name of every one of his children. Okay? Every one of the children is named by God. It's part of the prophecy. So call his name Jezreel, for in just a little while I will punish the house of Jehu for the blood of Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. And on that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. Now this is full of symbolism, okay? Jehu, for example, is the name of a king decades and decades before had chosen and God had anointed to be the king over Israel, because Ahab, who was the king, whose wife was Jezebel, and was one of, if not the absolute worst king Israel ever had, he had come to his time where God had said, I have had it up to here and beyond. Ahab, you're done. Jezebel, you're done. And so he appointed Jehu to be the next king. So that's symbolic. Jehu was the king chosen to bring judgment on the reign of the king at the time, Ahab, and to make things right and turn the nation's heart back to God. And he says, the house of Jehu is about to fall. Why? Because you were given a job and you're not doing it. Kind of like God has already actually made all the missionaries come to America. You're it. If we're doing it, great. If we're not, we don't need others. We need to be. Same idea. Jehu, you're going down. Well, Jehu is actually, as a person, long gone, but his house still reigns. His dynasty is there. And Jeroboam II knows what all this means. Jezreel is the valley where Jehu defeated Ahab and Jezebel's army. It's where that judgment was rendered. So God says, Hosea, I want you to name your kid Jezreel, so that every time you say his name, the country knows your time is up, your cup is full, and God is now ready to deal with this. It's tough, isn't it? And this is what he says. So Hosea lost plenty of sleep that night, but not as much as he's going to lose. When we go on, verse 6, she conceived again and bore a daughter. Now, I've said before, I said it just a few minutes ago, pronouns tell the story. Where are the pronouns? Where are the fatherly pronouns in this sentence? Did you notice a difference? Because let me go back for a second. When we have it in, that is slow today. I don't know if your screen's doing what mine's doing, but this one over here is real slow. It says that he took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him, Hosea, a son. Now look at verse 6 one more time. She conceived again and bore a. Where's the pronoun? Why is that? And the Lord said to him, call her name No Mercy, for I will no more have mercy on the house of Israel to forgive them at all. Now remember, God does not enjoy judgment. When God describes himself, he talks about his being a merciful, compassionate, forgiving God, loyal to 1,000 generations to those who are faithful to him. So then why does he feel like this? Why would he have Hosea call his child No Mercy? People do a lot of research about what to name their children. A lot of times they might name their daughter things like maybe something that would be rooted in mercy, but in another language, or faith, or Vera, which also means faith, or hope, or all of those kinds of things. No, he has to name his children according to Israel's current spiritual situation. Would you want to name your children according to America's current spiritual situation? No. He has to. This time it's No Mercy. Hosea also would know the language and what it means. He wrote it. This is not his child. And he knows this is not his child. This is a hard obedience, isn't it? I wasn't making a joke when I said earlier, faithfulness to God does not always mean your best life now. Sometimes faithfulness to God will mean that you are one who has to carry a burden for God's people. It may mean that you have to carry a burden for your family. It may mean that you have to do really hard, faithful things. And only in doing those does the blessing come. It is not all stuff baptized and made special. It is hard at times. And this was Hosea's task. Call her name No Mercy, because the time's up for Israel. But I will have mercy. I will have mercy on the house of Judah, and I will save them by the Lord their God. Now this is interesting because this is not talking about just the moment in time. This is talking about what would come in the future. It's messianic. I will have mercy on the house of Judah, and I will save them by the Lord their God. This is God saying, I will save them by the Lord. What's he talking about? Jesus Christ, the Son of God, our Messiah. I will not save them by bow. I will not save them by sword. I will not save them by war. Say it louder for the people in the back that might not catch on that this is still true. I will not save them by bow, by sword, by war, by horses, or by horsemen. That's the fight of the kingdom of the world that's going down. Let them fight their crud out there together. Ours is to be saved by the Messiah and the Son of God. Get the difference, Christians. It's true when you look around, we're not getting the difference. He doesn't save the world. through violence. He doesn't save the world through wars. The Messiah came so that when he comes again, we will be saved from the violence and from the wars. And in the meantime, our task is to bring the kingdom of God on earth. Every time we pray the Lord's Prayer, we ask to be part of that. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth. Some people think we're only supposed to be peaceful and loving and compassionate once we get to heaven. If that's your plan, you better buy some fireproof luggage, because that's not the way it works. He intends for us here and now to get this, our Messiah, by the power of the Spirit and the fruit of the Spirit, calls us to be people who trust not in bows and horsemen, but by the word and the strength and the holiness of our God and our Messiah. And we need to get that. People have clearly been needing to get that for a long time. I will save them by the Lord their God. In chapter 4, Hosea then goes on, or really we're still talking about the Lord, but through Hosea, tells us why. So what did Israel do? I talked about Baal worship, but why would it be so bad that he would say, there's going to be no mercy for you, and your king and his dynasty is now going to be dust on the floor of the valley of Jezreel? Why would it be that bad? It's important for us to know, because in our time and in our place, God still holds the same principles and the same truths and the same rights and wrongs that he held then. What does he say that they did that was so wrong? Hear the word of the Lord, O children of Israel, for the Lord has a controversy in the inhabitants of the land. There is, this first one, I color-coded them just so you can see them. There is no faithfulness or steadfast love. When we look around, what do we see? There is no faithfulness or steadfast love. And I'm not talking about judging the world. He's not judging in this particular writing Assyria or Babylon. He's talking to his own people. So we're going to talk to the church. If we can't love everyone with the love of God, with the grace and mercy of God, then it can be said of us, there is no steadfast love. If my love gives out, where my nationality, color, race, region of country, town, politics, economic status, if my love runs out when those things change, when I pass a boundary, then steadfast love clearly does not remain. It's not there. No knowledge of God in the land. This isn't talking about whether or not you can win a Bible trivia game. Do you know God? Do you have a relationship with God? God is saying, I used to know a lot of people around here. I don't know any of you anymore. It's the same kind of know where Jesus says, depart from me, I do not know you, in his parable. There was no knowledge of God in the land. Number 2, verse 2. There is swearing, lying, murder, stealing, adultery. I should have bought a Brock's Band-Aid, shouldn't I? All those things can be found, unfortunately, among the people of God and all over the land. They break all bounds, meaning they keep pushing the envelope. They just keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing. What can we do now? What can we do now? What can we do now? Where will we be rebellious now? They just break all bounds. All the guardrails are off. I'm going to do what I want to do. I don't care what the Lord said. And I think the last is just what happens when all the others happen. And then bloodshed after bloodshed. They're killing each other out there. Therefore, the land mourns, and all who dwell in it languish, and also the beasts of the field, and the birds of the heavens, and even the fish of the sea are taken away. Reminds me of what Paul says in the book of Romans, that the earth groans for God to come, for the Jesus to come again. It groans and yearns for the day when all will be burned up, and then the new heavens and the new earth, all will be made new and restored. Even creation longs for things to be right again. And God doesn't write this easily. He writes it with a broken heart. He's just telling us, this is what I see, over and over again. In Hosea 11, and I think this is one of the most beautiful passages, and let me turn over there because I may read more than is up there. In Hosea 11, he changes metaphors, and he goes from husband, wife, with this adulterous wife, and Hosea's wife was incredibly adulterous. She didn't just go out and prostitute herself. She chased men around. She became a prostitute because when her beauty wore off, then she had to become a prostitute. And so then she goes and she does that, and she has all of these kids, and she chases after people. And part of her thing was, she kept saying, Hosea doesn't take care of me, these men take care of me. And God has to say to Hosea, I know what that's like. They're saying Baal gave them that. I gave them that. They're saying they earned that. I'm saying I blessed you with that. He changes metaphors and goes to the metaphor of a child. When Israel was a child, I loved him. And out of Egypt, I called my son. The more they were called, the more they went away. They kept sacrificing to the Baals and burning offerings to idols. Yet it was I. Can you feel in these words what God feels? It was I who taught Ephraim to walk. I took them up by their arms, but they didn't know that I healed them. I led them with cords of human kindness and the bands of love, and I became to them as one who eases the yoke on their jaws, and I bent down to them and fed them. This image of God as a father who takes in, the image is almost like a stray child that was fatherless, and he takes in this orphan, and he cleans them up, and he loves them, and he teaches them in all the ways. He says, the cords of kindness. I am the one who taught them what good was. I taught them what love is. I taught them what hope could be. I gave them all of these things, but now whenever I call their name, they just run. Some of you as parents, unfortunately, know exactly what that's like. The more you call out, hey, come over here. No, I'm going. Rebellious, ungrateful, and ungodly. And yet, the tone you hear in God's voice when you read this is just the broken heart of a father, the prodigal son's father, looking down the road. But he hasn't started walking back yet. A broken-hearted father, a broken-hearted husband. That's God, all too often. It sounds at the end of chapter 1 like that's the end of Israel's story, but it is not. The end of their story does actually get better. God gives Hosea more instruction. We're going to go backwards to chapter 3. And he says this, and the Lord said to me, go again. Love a woman who is loved by another man and is an adulteress. Hosea, I need you to love Gomer. I need you to go back and love her. He doesn't say, I want you to go back and live with her. He doesn't say, I want you to put up with her. He says, Hosea, I want you to love her. Even as the Lord loves the children of Israel. Though they turn to other gods and love the cakes of raisins. I know that sounds like a weird thing, but raisin cakes were used in idol worship. It's a food that was all about decadent, self-serving, sensuous, idol worship. So I bought her. This is Hosea now. So I bought her for 15 shekels of silver, and a homer and a lethek of barley. How humiliating for them both. Can you imagine you've gone so far, fallen so far, that you're being sold at market, and all you brought was 15 shekels and a little bit of barley. And you got to walk home with your husband, who's embarrassed. He has to be. How could you not be? He's embarrassed. And you know that this is all you brought. And all you bring to your husband now is the brokenness of your unfaithfulness. And that's Israel. But who's God in that picture? God will walk the embarrassing walk. God is not afraid of the walk of shame. God will pay the price to set the woman free. He will walk her home in love. He will clean her up. He will nurse her wounds. And he will love her. And it will not be about what she has done or what she deserves. He loves her. He loves her. I saw somebody posted the other day. I don't know what they were talking about. Well, I do. I know what they were talking about. I don't know who they were talking about. And they posted, I really want to learn to hate you instead of to love you, but I don't want to hate, so I can't do that either. So I'm trying real hard to feel nothing for you. That's how people often deal with that kind of betrayal. Yet God said, I want you to love again, because I still love, even though. He says, we don't have time for it all, but in Hosea he says that he just made up his mind. Then instead of just banning her and sending her off, that he would actually take her out to the desert, have some alone time. That's a nice honeymoon in the desert, isn't it? Everybody likes to go to Fort Stockton. They would go on their honeymoon. He says, I will try to woo you all over again. I'm going to court you again. I'm going to make you fall in love with me all over again. And again, this is really God to Israel. And that was his determination. Sometimes it's hard for us, if we've been Gomer, it is hard for us to really believe that God would do that. That he would really accept us as we are, that he would really love us again, that he would really care. Sometimes we never even thought that in the first place, so why would we think he would do it again? We've never been confident in God's love. That was the truth of, a lot of you are familiar with the singer Rich Mullin. In the movie about his life, they share a moment where he had his come to Jesus moment. And it wasn't a come to Jesus moment that was a reckoning. It was a final face-to-face with God's love, as God paid his 15 shekels and his bucket of barley and took him home. What brought him to that moment was a friend put in a cassette tape of a preacher named Brennan Manning, great author. And he played it. And I'm going to read to you the words that Rich Mullin heard that day that caused him to understand for the first time God loves us as much as Hosea had to love Gomer and more. Hosea would probably say he was a poor reflection of the depth of God's love. God loves us. I want to read this. In the 33 years since I was first ambushed by Jesus in a little chapel in the mountains of western Pennsylvania, and the literally thousands of hours of prayer and meditation, the silence and solitude in those years, I am now utterly convinced that on Judgment Day, the Lord Jesus will ask one question and only one question. Did you believe that I loved you, that I desired you, that I waited for you day after day? Same way Hosea had to wait up for Gomer to come home. That I longed to hear the sound of your voice. The real believers will respond and say, I believe in your love, and I tried to shape my life as a response to it. But many of us who are so faithful in our ministry, our practice, our church going, are going to answer, well, frankly, no, sir. I never really believed. And there is the difference between the real believers and the nominal Christians that abound in our churches across the land. No one can measure like a believer the depth and intensity of God's love. But then again, no one can measure like a believer the effectiveness of our gloom, our pessimism, our low self-esteem, our self-hatred and despair that block God's way to us. Do you see now why it's so important to lay hold of this basic truth of our faith? Because you're only going to be as big as your own concept of God. We make God in our own image, and He winds up being as fussy and rude and narrow-minded and judgmental and legalistic and unloving and unforgiving as we are. I've been in churches, he says, in Bangor, Maine, Miami, Seattle, San Diego, and St. Louis, and honest, the God of so many Christians I meet is too small for me, because He is not the God of the Word. He is not the God who is revealed in and by Jesus Christ, who at this moment comes to your seat and He says, I have a word for you. I know your whole life story. I know every skeleton in your closet. I know every moment of sin and shame, dishonesty and degrading love that's darkened your past. Right now, I know your shallow faith, the feeble prayer life you have, your inconsistent discipleship. And my word to you is this: I dare you to trust that I love you. I dare you to trust that I love you, not as you should be, because none of us are as we should be. I love you.